All right, so we are going to intro our first unit. And our first unit for human geography is population and migration. And so you're going to, as you take a look at the intro to population geography lesson, this video that I'm recording right now will end up here. I'll also post the presentation with the terms. So for human geography, it will be more content driven than Success 191 is or was. We will have a test or a quiz at the end of each unit. And so the content that I'm going to go through right now will be things that you will be tested on. And then along with the content, you'll have two activities that will end up in the gradebook. And you'll see here the Human Reach Pear Deck and the World Population Geo-Inquiry. So I'm going to start with the content, and then I will talk about the two activities. So once again, population migration. So when we start talking about population, there are different ways to see population. There's also a number of terms that you'll need to know to help you understand why populations look like they do. So first of all, when we talk about populations, we're talking about people, we're talking about rises and falls in population, the study of population. So on this first slide, you are going to see one way to take a look at population, and we're not going to be using these types of maps very often, but these are called cartograms, and they intentionally distort regions or countries based on how many people are in a particular region. So this looks really funky because all of the boundaries and the borders are all messed up. But it's blowing up countries based on how much population they have. And some countries are having to be shrunk down due to the fact that they might have a very large land area, but their population, the people living in that country, are pretty small. So if we take a look at this map, you can see this is the country of India. And India is a very, very big country in terms of population. So is China. And you can see that those kind of overwhelm a lot of the other countries. But you see over here that Australia is a relatively small country. It doesn't have very many people, but we think about Australia as having a pretty vast land area, but a lot of their land is very sparsely populated. So on this next slide, you're going to see a different cartogram. And this is also, like I said, blowing up countries based on how many people they have. So the United States actually is the third largest country in the world. We have 326 million people. And you can see in Africa, for example, Nigeria is the largest country by population. But we take a look over here at this side of the world. So this is Asia. And you can see over here, India and China, once again, very much overwhelming the region. This is Russia right here. Russia has a huge land mass, but it is relatively small when we actually take, it's not over, it's still a very large country. It just, when we have to shrink it down to the proportional size of their population, it becomes a lot smaller. Okay, so I am going to just kind of remind you, we're not going to you're not going to have to learn these terms because we just did in the previous lesson. But one way that we can take a look at population is through dot maps. And so a dot map will show you the distribution of world populations. And so once again, this is the same map we took a look at before. One dot represents 100,000 people. And you can see from here that there are regions that have a lot of dots. And once again, we said India and China are the largest countries in the world. China is actually a larger country by population than India is. But you can see that most of China's population, this will show you a really good distribution. Most of China's population is actually concentrated in the eastern part of China, whereas India is pretty densely populated throughout. A country like Bangladesh, which is a really, really small country, but has a lot of people, actually has one of the highest densities. And we'll talk about what density means in a little bit. All right. So another way we could take a look at population, another term that we learned in the previous unit, is through an isoline map. And so an isoline map would be using lines and oftentimes shading the in-betweens of those lines in to represent where we see a change in value of something. So on this map, we're taking a look at population density, and the blue regions are the regions that are the most dense. People are, and when we talk about density, we're talking about how packed in are the people. And so people are really, really densely populated over here. All right, so there's a couple of videos on these slides. I will be posting the slides. These are optional videos. They're really good, but we're not going to be watching them together. Okay, so there's a couple of slides here. You can watch the videos on your own. All right, so we're going to be going over some population terms. At this point, I would suggest that you should have a notebook out. So in your notebook, you're going to want to have either a section of a notebook or you're going to want to have a notebook just for human geography. And you will be taking notes for human geography, and the notes you will be able to use on your tests and quizzes in order to help you with those tests and quizzes. So it's to your advantage that you take notes. Your notes should be handwritten because there is studies that show that handwritten notes are going to be a lot more effective. Okay. So another thing to help you out with your note taking is I'm going to try to highlight or put the words in yellow when we suggest. So highlight in yellow when we suggest that you put them in your notes. You may use all handwritten notes on unit tests. I'll talk more about tests in the future. And make sure to make a unit title big and on a fresh page each time you start a new unit. This will make finding your notes easier for the exam. So the first unit has more teacher-given notes. By the end of the semester, we'll hope you feel more comfortable generating more of your own notes independently from readings, videos, and notes. So this is how you should begin your notes. You'll notice this slide is in yellow. And so it says Unit 1, Population and Migration. That is the title of our first unit. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to find a page of your notebook, a fresh page, fresh section, write human geography notes, and then on top of that page, write Unit 1, Population and Migration. And this is how you'll know this is where you're going to find your notes. Okay, so our first term that we're going to talk about, and just a reminder that as you're taking notes, you can pause this video. You can go back to this video. So it's kind of one of the advantage of doing some asynchronous work here. Population density. So I've mentioned density quite a bit already in that last section. When we talk about population density, we're talking about the number of people in an area divided by the total land area. And so what that means is that we are looking at how many people on average are there in an area of land. And if that number is higher, that means we have a high population density. And what that really means is that there are a lot of people packed into a particular area. Okay, so density is about like how packed in are the people. And if we used to have a really low population density, then people are pretty spread out. There are not as many people in an area and we divide that by the total land area. So it's a way that we can compare the density across countries of different areas. So even though China has the most people, it's actually going to have a lower population density than India because China does have a bigger land area. The people are packed in, but they're not packed in as much as they are in India on average. So if we take a look at population density, we can see that the places that have more dots are going to be considered higher density areas. So that's our first term. So this is just a list of terms. You can see everything here is in yellow. And I'm going to go through these terms, and then we're going to talk about, and eventually you're going to be using them on your geo-inquiry that you're going to be doing for your assignment today. So the first one is birth rate. So when we talk about how do populations rise and fall, worldwide, there's really only two ways to add to the population. So there's one main way to add to the population, and that's by babies being born. So when babies are born, they add to the population of a particular area. And when when people die, that is going to subtract from the population. So in order to figure out how many babies are being born in a country, on average, we want to use a number that tells us really like how many children are being born per person. Because obviously in a country like China, there are 1.4 billion people. There's obviously going to be a lot more babies being born in China than there are in a small country for example, like Australia. But we want to know, on average, are women giving birth to more children in China or in Australia? And the way that we do that is we take a look at the birth rate. So that is the number of births in a year. So the number represents the number of births in a year per 1,000 people in the population. So we take 1,000 people in the population, we count on average, we count up the number of births, we divide that by 1,000, and we get a birth rate. Now, birth rate numbers are usually somewhere like 6 or 30 on the really high end. So we end up getting a number. So a birth rate of 30 would mean that there are 30 children born in a year per 1,000 people in the population. So if there's 2,000 people in the population, that means there's 60 babies being born. And then the death rate's the same thing. It's the number of deaths in a year per 1,000 people in the population. And death rates are in most countries lower than birth rates. So you might have a death rate of 12. That means of every 1,000 people in the population, about 12 of those people will die in any given year. So in order to figure out if populations are rising or falling, we need to be able to compare birth rate and death rate. And so birth rate and death rate, if we subtract those two, we can figure out how fast that country is growing. So if I have a country that has a birth rate of 20 and a death rate of 12, what I can actually do is take 20 minus 12 and get the number 8. And I can figure out, and I'm going to actually change the decimal point, so it's actually going to be 0.8. And we're not going to get too much into why, but I can figure out that that country is growing by a percentage of about 0.8% per year. So because it is 0.8%, that country is growing every year by 0.8%. So if that population was 100, if the country's population was 100 in the first year, then the next year it's going to have 100.8 people in the population. So natural increase rate is birth rate minus death rate. And we can figure out if that natural increase rate is really high, like 3%, that country is growing really fast. If it's really low or negative, some birth rates are negative because there are actually more people dying than being born. That country is growing really slow or might even be declining in population. And then another number we take a look at is the infant mortality rate. And this is the number in a country of children that die before they reach the age of 1 per 1,000 babies being born. So most countries today have falling infant mortality rates. They're much lower than they were 20 years ago. But there are still some countries that have close to 100 as their infant mortality rate. And what that would mean would be, because it's 100 deaths per 1,000 babies born, what that means is that about 1 in every 10 children do not make it to their first birthday. And the reason that infant mortality is really important is it can tell us a lot about the health of the country. Okay, a couple other terms that you're going to be using. The next one's total fertility rate, and that's the average number of children a woman will have in her lifetime. So we take the entire population, we count up how many children each woman is going to have, and we average that. So in a country where their total fertility rate is 3, that means on average, each woman in the population is having 3 children. Some women are having 0, some women are having 7, some women are having 2, some women are having 3, but on average, the average is 3. Now, because at least at this point, only women have children, if we want to just replace the population, we don't want it to grow or shrink, the replacement rate is going to be about 2, meaning that if every woman had about 2 children, they would replace themselves, they would replace a male counterpart, and that population over time wouldn't get any bigger, but it wouldn't get any smaller either. The replacement rate is the total fertility rate needed for a population to stay the same from one generation to the next. The actual number is about 2.1, And the reason it's a little bit over 1 or over 2 is because some of the children that are born do not reach to the point where they're able to have their own children. They die before they become, before they go through their reproductive years. All right. So that was a lot of information. So we're going to try some of this out. You are going to start here. Okay, so this is a Human Reach Pear Deck. When you open it up, it should be student paced. So you are going to go through and you are going to click through the slides and you are going to answer the questions as you go. So the first thing you're going to need to do is open up this story map. So you're going to open this into a new tab. You're going to be scrolling through. There are chapters up here, so you can see where you need to change chapters. But you're going to scroll through, and you're going to answer the questions as you go. So based on the context clues in this section, what is the best definition of population density? So you're going to start here. You're going to start with understanding population density. Right here. So understanding population density, you're going to read through. There's some beautiful maps. You read through the information. And you are going to try to come up with the correct answer there. There's some other questions. What seems to determine the population density of a given area? Then it tells you to move on to the next section. Some of them are going to be written answers. You're going to write your answers in there. Some of them are more multiple choice. So that's the Pear Deck. This will be graded, so I will be able to see your answers. This will be graded. And then the next one is the World Population GeoInquiry. Definitely reach out to me if you have any questions about this. But what this is you are going to go to the map link here. You're going to open up the map, give it a second to load. You're eventually going to click on content. And you are going to follow the instructions. So you are going to first click on the layer named World Population. So you're going to click actually off Natural Increase Rate. And there's some questions that you're going to be answered. And then you're going to click on another layer, World Population. So this is step by step. Please come to office hours this week sometime if you do not understand that assignment. All right, so once again, reach out to me or come to office hours if you have any questions.